Hi, I'm Paul Bowman, CEO at Wexer, the digital fitness specialist who deliver over 25 million fitness experiences per year for our partners worldwide. Welcome to the Wexer podcast, where I'll be speaking to industry experts to bring you insights and advice to support your business journeys. We're mixing it up a little bit today, and I'm actually bringing on a friend, first of all, and one of the most smartest people I've ever worked with, Jamie Foggon, who is the CTO of Wexer. Jamie, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Good to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm looking forward to this one. We're essentially doing this as a little bit of an announcement about everything that we're doing from a product point of view. But look, I think, for me, Jamie has a huge amount of experience, which I'm going to let him go through, and which he can share with others. So that's why we wanted to put this podcast together. So Jamie, I think it's really important for listeners to just understand your background. Do you want to give us a little nutshell?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it brief. Stop me if I go on too long. I've been around for a while. So I think around 23, 25 years experience in tech and, digital in the internet and so on. First career was a bit of a misstep. And then very quickly, the internet started to get talked about. And I just had this sort of feeling like that just feels right for me. I'd always been a bit of a kind of sort of a hybrid, bit sciencey, bit techie, bit creative. And it was around sort of late 90s that companies first started to get in on the internet as a thing that you could make money out of and promote yourself through and so on. And I just sort of lucked out, got connected with the right people. Somebody was setting up a team in a small agency in London that basically had done print up until that point, pretty much. But back then you could just get involved in the internet, just, as long as you had a pulse. People were just like, come on, there's loads of money in this, just get involved. And
this was before .com bust?
Yeah, it was like 98, I think. I joined that first agency, so I was sort of early 20s. And we did some pretty cool stuff there. I mean, I was just thinking back over it. Still in touch with some of those people I work with, but we did this pretty incredible project for BT, British Telecom in the UK. And actually, it was really funny. It's kind of almost full circle with my career now, because I think it was, if not the first, it was one of the first user-generated content upload solutions that we built for them. And it was because BT run the whole copper network in the UK. So they were the first to get in on broadband, and they were doing this to really demonstrate what you could do with broadband. So we built this sort of 4-zone user-generated site where people could upload videos, music, writing. I can't remember what the fourth one was, but yeah, we were doing video uploads in the late 90s when people were on, dial-up modems. So, somehow, it's crazy. I was like, I'm back doing video 20 years later when it's, slightly higher resolution. So that really set the groundwork for my kind of knowledge, because back then there were no roles defined or anything. Nobody was called a business analyst or a product manager. They just didn't exist in that realm. So, I was doing all sorts of stuff then, just figuring out as you go along, and great little team of people, and we just got this thing done somehow. So did
that shape you from because as a CTO, you normally, not to put CTOs in boxes, but you've got either the very entrepreneurial CTO that usually takes companies from the early days. You've got a very process-led CTO, or you've got your traditional kind of, you're building your road type CTO. You have really a great ability to kind of grow across everything. Like, is that where that came from?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I learned front-end development, back-end development, how databases work. I learned about UX design before it was even a thing, before even that name existed. So yeah, I think so. I've always been really strongly from the creative side as well. Like, I love design, and things have to look right and work right. So I think maybe some CTOs are very much from the sort of, it's all about the tech. I mean, the tech is really important, but I think for me, the tech is it's always very much just an enabler to make stuff work for people. And I can't stand anything more than when I see something that seems like it's tech for the sake of it. Because it's very easy. You see it all over the place, and it's just like, well, what value is that really adding, and does it really make sense? So then I worked in agencies for a lot of years, so you get a lot of experience across different types of client accounts and different industry sectors. I was involved in a startup for a short period of time, which taught me a lot. Certainly didn't succeed, but I mean, it was in a great area. This was going back about 10 years now in renewable energy. Guy ran an energy company, had a great idea, needed somebody like me to help get it off the ground, but it was way too bootstrapped, needed a lot more investment, and didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. But yeah, you learn a lot. Yeah. And then I suppose the last sort of chapter is the whole fitness journey, which has been close to 10 years now.
Yeah, because did fitness find you? Or did you find fitness? Like, how did the fitness? Well, I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very into sport and fitness. I mean, I was a pretty decent squash player when I was younger. Through my teens, played for university. I was number 1 for Manchester University sports squash team.
Come on, David.
Not exactly world beating, but I was a decent. I've always been very into fitness and stuff. So when this came along through an agency, a friend who's working for an agency was like, when you should come and check this out. And that was Tribal DDB in London. Got involved in the Fitness First account, which is where we first started conceiving the early phase of the platform that we've now got as Wexer. And obviously went through several iterations of evolution between then and now. But that was another
podcast.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So what was the original brief? So Fitness First came to Tribal, and then that you were on the Tribal side, right?
Yeah, it was when they were doing the global rebrand. So they spent a lot of money at that stage. Fitness First was operating in, I think, 13 countries. I think that included the Middle East, which was franchise model, but one of the few kind of global fitness brands, really. And for
listeners, this is when Oaktree took over and essentially wanted to get Fitness First to be the McDonald's of fitness, right? They wanted as much global expansion as possible. So it seemed like there was a bit of an endless budget. Yeah,
and there was a lot of money spent on the rebrand, like the visual rebrand, identity, the fit out of the clubs. They put a lot of money behind the digital platform. And there was a lot of research and a lot of really smart thinking. I think we still, refer to some of that stuff now, that, the stuff they did about the confidence, evolution of people's confidence and the different kind of persona groups that you get in gyms and how digital services can really support that.
Generally still the best research I've actually ever seen. I'm not just saying that we own that research. It was the most simplistic way of explaining change behavior for users. Essentially, the more confident they get, the more they're going to engage with different products. But actually mapping that out is such a critical point. And because Tribal did that or not? It was a different research company.
It was a different company that did the research. They had all sorts of researchers. They had a behavioral psychologist involved as well. So they went pretty deep on understanding, the motivations and, what drives intrinsic motivation and things like that. I still refer to some of that thinking sometimes as well, how to try and get people actually wanting to exercise and train rather than just sort of forcing it on them. But yeah, we did a lot of early thinking on just what should this do. And the thing that really appealed to me was, you've got the gym goers that are just paying their membership fees every month, which for some people is a lot of money anyway. And then if you really want good support, you're quadrupling that to get a PT session once a week. So you're going for like £50 or £70 a month in the UK to sort of hundreds if you've got a PT. And this digital service was supposed to sort of help fill that gap, and even provide sort of steps in between. And it's very, very difficult to actually execute that. And I think in hindsight, I think it was just extremely early thinking, which seemed strange to me. But you need to look at the whole landscape, all the players involved, the PTs, the club managers, the CEOs, and so on. It's got to work for everybody and work with the membership models and not alienate the PT workforce, for example. And I think we learned a lot of stuff like that.
Don't you think it was just timing though? Because I agree with you. Like I actually, the strategy paper was such a good strategy. Like essentially, it was personalization of this fitness services and getting people to change behavior and move them through confidence. Like that. That it worked well. It just wasn't. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I don't want to talk about the failures of Fitness First, but like it was the right message. It was the right thing. And if you think about operators, what they're trying to do now is exactly that, right? Trying to personalize the fitness journey, and trying to galvanize the team to support that.
I mean, if anything, you can't give up at the first attempt, and not that they did, but then as probably a lot of people know, then Fitness First Group was broken up. Oaktree sold off each of the country units, and then the platform was sold off as a separate business essentially, and that's when you realized that it was something worth having and snapped it up along with me. Yeah, and then off we went. But I mean, they could have. You've got to try and try again. I mean, look at a lot of those sort of big tech successes, like Airbnb didn't hit the ground and immediately started making billions. They were doing absolutely nothing for like what 10, 12 years or something. Suddenly got the formula right, all the timing was right in the market, and then there they are where they are now.
Everyone thinks there are some products that fly in the first year. They're huge demand, but in reality, the overnight success is usually a 10-year overnight success story, right? Like in most products. So, and then talk to me about that. So of course, Wexer purchases the technology and Connected Fitness Labs, that which you were leading. Taking over an internal team in Denmark on a slightly different product, virtual, and then of course managing an outsource entity. Like the challenges that you faced were quite immense straight from the get-go. How did you manage that?
I don't know. I'm not sure I was still managing it, to be honest. I mean, there's always challenges. I mean, the sort of most front of mind thing now is obviously with the IntelliVideo acquisition this year. And I think, when you're managing remote teams and people coming in under different circumstances, maybe through an acquisition, or, you've got contractors or you've got an outsourced company, I mean, you need to try and have some attention for everybody. You can't just expect people sort of somewhere, some remote location, 8 hours time difference or whatever, to sort of feel, like they're drinking the Kool-Aid and they're part of the mission and they really want to do it. So that's the thing that's most important, is to just try to make people feel part of the team. And a big part of that is sort of in a slightly boring way, it's the software and the processes side of things. I mean, without having things like Slack and Asana, how we've got them set up to just be our sort of operational comms backbone, I can't imagine what it was like before that, to be honest. I mean, it's like thinking about before.
A lot of miscommunication, Jamie. I think is the fair assumption.
Yeah. So that just makes a huge difference, having that right, and having key people, like Vanda, just making that stuff just tick so that it just works. And you need to get people onboarded into that world when they join, from whatever sort of angle they're joining. They've just got to be properly onboarded into that way of working and that culture.
For listeners, I think it was even before. It was before COVID. Asana came in before COVID. We realized that as Wexer grew, we were going to be more and more remote in our nature, just because we're spanning so many different offices and so many different countries, that we realized that we had to use technology to enable our communication and really support our culture, right? And that, I think I'd have to say would be one of the best users of Asana in terms of the deployment in our company, where it kind of is the backbone of everything that we do, and in regards to managing a client when an after sales service, to right to new features, developing everything. So is that probably been one of the, because that was a project and a half put in there and through. Is that what makes you the most productive as Asana?
I think so. I mean, it's kind of the glue between everything, really. I mean, from like client feedback, internal questions, new business opportunities that come in there and get sort of triaged and addressed and responded to, and then all the migration projects we're doing with IntelliVideo. I mean, it all has a home, very well structured through Vanda, again, just making sure everything's set up in a logical way. Without that, you'd just be constantly sifting through emails and Slack channels, and it's very project based the way we're operating now.
Well, and it's more systematic. I think it's fair to say, and don't reiterate too much here, Jamie, but I'm not the most process-led person. But one thing I've learned from Jamie is to follow processes and actually improve the process rather than just create a new process. Right? It's a real key component.
I mean, you do. I was just going to say, and it is, you do have to constantly improve. You it's not like set something up and then move on.
Yes.
And constantly having to adjust with a stable base, I would say. You can't just keep pulling the rug out from under people's feet and saying, no, we're going to do it like this. That's chaos.
No, that is chaos. And then talk to me about the IV migration, because of course, as a for context for listeners, is we've bought another mobile provider, predominantly in the US, quite a feature-rich platform, but still video on demand service, and so like we've had to match actually quite a lot of features to make sure that essentially people are actually getting a better platform than what they were used to. But that's I think something that I think a lot of people don't realize is it's doing a migration, doing an acquisition is a project in itself, but doing a migration under a pretty we put a challenge of ourselves to do it within a year to do the migration process. So that puts a lot more challenges on. Like, I guess what's been your learnings on this?
Yeah, maybe just to sort of explain the kind of main parts of that. So because we bought a similar platform, similar company to ours, so part of it was buying all their clients. But what came with that was you've got a bunch of clients that are running on a platform which has a certain feature set. And some of those, as with everything, not everything's used actively or that important, but there are some things that are super important to those clients and used by a lot of end users of theirs, their customers. And you can't just, and the plan was to migrate into our platform. We never intended to keep the IntelliVideo platform running alongside ours. That's just, it didn't make good business sense. So the clients on the IB platform are getting migrated over to ours. But in order to do that, we have to sort of fill what we call the gap features, or the feature gaps that they expect or would need in order to move over. So yeah, it's been building the sort of the migration engine to be able to migrate them seamlessly over to our system. So the users come over, they've got the same username and passwords, they've got the same data, favorites, and so on. And we've proven we can do that. And that's a pretty complicated feat in itself. And then alongside that, building the features that specific clients needed. Like, we didn't have the ability to offer offline downloads. People are very used to on things like Spotify or Netflix. You can just download onto your local device for playback with no internet connection. It's quite a complicated feature to build. So we built that. And there's some very solid use cases that's needed for. So, that's one, for example. So that's sort of like been the year really up until now. Just a lot of complex projects that all have interdependencies. Client one needs this feature and this feature. Client two needs only that feature, but not those two. So there's a lot of heavy planning around that and migration script building. But I mean, the overall positive of it is like we've talked about, is that we bought a lot of learning. We bought a lot of 10 plus years or whatever that in IntelliVideo were running and building those features. They built a lot of stuff. And what you can see out of the back of that is what are the clients and the users happy with. It's kind of like buying 10 years of innovation and iteration and thinking and trial and error. A lot of the time when you're building something, you don't actually really know the truth of it, what's out there in the market and really how it's being used, or whether it's sort of, it's just marketing, PR spin. We know from this how many users are using the playlist feature, and we know it's many thousands who are using, some people got hundreds of playlists. So that's actually quite, I haven't had to.
Yeah, from a product point of view, is it well, I know it's a stressful thing in your migration, but has that been a good learning? Because, like, to your point, like, we've talked about playlists and the audio media and subscriptions, different ways of doing it, lots, but we haven't actually felt like we should have pulled the trigger until we saw IV and how much it was being used. Like, it's a good process to go through from a product point of view, right?
Yeah, it is in a way. I haven't. The one thing I haven't had on my plate this year to think about is like, okay, let's figure out what we're doing next, like what's coming in Q3. And, prior to this year, I used to always try and have a sort of 12, 18 month kind of horizon. And we'd always sort of re-prioritize that every 2 or 3 months, at the start of each quarter. And there's been no need to do that because we've had this big list of prioritized things which we know are heavily used by people. And it just sort of, focuses your mind 100% on that. I'm now starting to coming out of that and starting to think, right, okay, we need to have the plan for next year figured out, because and there's always a list, there's always things, but
I know there's a lot of features, but what are your highlighted features that will be hitting the Wexer platform that you want to highlight?
So I think I talked about the offline downloads. That's quite a significant one. But one of the big add-ons is having audio media, so it doesn't need video, just like sort of podcast style content, really. I mean, I think that's a great one, because the thing I really like is not necessarily just going after the shiny things. There's sort of, again, things in the industry and in tech in general, like everybody's doing AI or machine learning or something like that. Just something simple like adding audio files. It's like, I mean, I guess when Apple went big on podcasts, you just sort of think, well, it's just an audio recording. But look at the success of it. I mean,
and more people are actually looking at that than a lot of other media that sits out there, right? Because naturally it fits into your life. You can go for a run, you can listen to it.
Yeah, it's so versatile, and that's the thing. I'm really hoping it really takes off on our platform, because you can get more content providers that might want to just produce audio content. You can have just wellness coaching kind of content. You can just sit down while you're doing it. You're not for once having to jump around and follow an instructor.
Come on.
A lot of people like
we
that.
all like to sit every now and again.
Exactly.
Even us at Wexer.
Yeah, and in the fitness space, it obviously lends itself to a lot of other use cases. Like you can have guided workouts on a treadmill or when you're out for a run. So really big possibilities on that. I'm really excited to see that launch.
And then we've added ratings as well. Like what would that look like for the end user?
So they'll see an average rating on a class and how many ratings that consists of. So that's pretty powerful. I mean, it's generally expected now, isn't it? It's almost a bit strange not to have it. We've talked about it in recent year or two, and it's never quite made it to the top of the list to do it. But I'm really pleased we've done that through the IntelliVideo push. It's also great from the client and the content provider's point of view, because what we've done from every single client that we've got rolled out is essentially collecting rating feedback data. So the users can put a rating out of 5, and then they can add a comment if they want to, and write a whole essay if they want to, and that all funnels in. So the clients can see all that data for their site, but the content providers can see it from all the sites, all our clients rolled out. So I won't start naming content providers, but they can go in, log into our partner portal, Video CMS, and sort of just see all the rating data from the whole Wexer arsenal of clients. So that's very. So
they can build their own assumptions of what country the content's being rated the highest, and then they can build more content for us on that. So I think that's a huge feature for content partners. I think it's important for users anyway, and club groups operating the system, especially when they're trying to work out what talent's working and what's not working. But I think for content partners in particular, I think it's going to be a huge feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they must be crying out for feedback like that. That's actual, first hand, not sort of through the grapevine. Oh, in this club they don't like. Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be the truth.
Sorry, Morton. And what else, Jamie?
So playlists I touched on. That's also a nice simple thing. Everybody's used to that concept from especially music platforms, but IntelliVideo had sort of proven it out in this video context, and you can use it. There's increasingly now more and more kind of sort of short form workouts, rather than having a sort of a 45-minute, 50-minute class or more. Quite often it'll just be like a 10-minute stretching routine, or a cool down after running, the mini routine, or a short hit session. Well, with this, you can basically sort of say, right, I want to sort of put my own thing together and sort of, put 2 or 3 workouts in sequence, and even do them in sequence if you want, like that. But also
which we see naturally on the play. We naturally see what I would call a shouldering class. So maybe it's a warm up of yoga going into a high intensity, and then maybe a cool down of yoga again. So we're seeing it anyway, but it makes it a whole lot easier by them doing it, actually putting it as a playlist. So it will automatically run, so they don't actually have to stop the player, open a new class. Nice.
Exactly. And I mean, we can evolve that as well. I mean, that is possibly where some machine learning kind of intelligence could come in to say, if you've got this workout, why not try this one and make a playlist to naturally add that on to the end of it for next time.
I know we're going through the features, but what is your view on machine learning? You mentioned a few times, like where do you think that the application is going to be for video on demand providers.
I mean, the thing is, with something like that, you need a pretty large data set to work with. Yeah. So you need either, sort of tens of thousands of users most likely, or, in the thousands of pieces of content. Otherwise, if somebody's done like a particular kind of 10-minute workout, there's no point in saying, how about doing this if the algorithm hasn't got enough to work with. Yeah. So you need to get to a certain size to make it sort of viable. I mean, when you're talking about music libraries like Spotify or Apple Music, I mean, they've got 30, 40, 50 million pieces of content there to sort of pattern match on. If you like this, you might also like this. So there's a whole bunch of ways that we can start using it. I mean, I think if you're crunching the data on hundreds of thousands of users or even millions of users, then sort of saying people who like this piece of content also like this one, or using ratings as an algorithm to drive most popular content. So I think in the next 12 months we will start to move towards that. Starting sort of the phase one is to set the groundwork and start collecting the data in the right format that you can feed it into the machine and see what the machine then gives you back. As most popular, most liked, most rated, things like that, and then it can give good business insights as well. I mean, then you can start to feed that back to content providers and things like that. Like, it takes the heavy lifting out of sort of grinding through reports and trying to find insights. Like predictive analytics, that kind of stuff. But it also really powerful as well.
Takes the when people have got recommending engines that you essentially just say this class is just always, or if this class gets played, then push this recommendation. With the amount of content that comes in on a regular basis, it gets outdated pretty quickly. So yes, it might be right in that time and space that we have the team doing that, but fundamentally moving forward, as new content comes in, it shouldn't be as I don't know, lethargic maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's both, isn't it? You still want people to see the new stuff, so it's different ways of. I mean, you could look at Netflix, for example. Then they're showing you what's most watched, what's most rated, and then based on what you've watched, what they think you're going to want to watch. So there's whole different angles to get into the library without having to just browse through it start to finish per genre or whatever.
And go and hit me with one more. Is there another one that you've got that you want to highlight?
Well, the subscription bundles is worth mentioning a bit. I mean, that's a huge thing. So some people might know, but just to explain briefly, our platform generally works as a kind of an all-in-one subscription model. Whether it's coming through a club membership that the user hasn't actually sort of physically got to subscribe on our platform, or they're going through a Stripe checkout. It's here's the subscription. You can either pay monthly or quarterly or annual or whatever, however the client wants to configure that. With bundles, this is a huge thing we're building to be able to sort of segment the library into different bundles of content essentially, and monetize them in whichever ways they want. So we've got clients that might offer content for different sports, for example. So then they can make a basketball subscription and then a separate football subscription, and it's good for the consumers because they can see out of all the thousands of classes, they don't really want them all. They just want this bundle, and an all-in might cost you, I don't know, $30 a month, and then you can get just football for 10 or something. So.
But it's fair to say it's Jamie's referring to some of our clients that have definitely more sports focused. I think we've learned a lot off those sport focused operators that actually you can, because I think naturally in fitness we're either adding it, and this is to most of the listeners, we're either adding it to a membership or we're selling it at the front of as its own digital subscription. We're actually kind of debundling. We're actually seeing a lot more revenue success, and what we've seen is when they can debundle and only just show like basketball shooting or a particular series, then we actually see a lot of upsell to an overall subscription. Of course, if it's priced well, then they go. Like I think a lot of the fitness operators that I hear are worried about debundling, so because then they won't get they'll go do that series and they drop off. But I think that assumption is actually not correct. Essentially, they're always going to find, as long as the platform is giving them value, they're always going to find more things that they want to work on. If it's shooting, if it's passing if it's whatever. And I think that type of analogy works quite well with fitness. Are you showing enough value in the other segments as well, right?
Yeah, and it's just that you've got the flexibility anyway. So there's still always the the all-in-one, get everything, all you can eat bundle, or you can choose the sub packages. Just to quickly run through a few of the other things, because there's so many good things we're adding this year. So there's the external live events. Our scheduling system, I'm not aware of anybody that's got the flexibility and the power that we've got in ours. Not to sound too sort of bigging up, but I mean, it really is like we've put a lot of work into this. You can have true live events. So like literally start the stream and the instructor's streaming live to whoever's watching at that moment. And the simulated live feature that we built last year, maybe 18 months ago, where you can upload content.
Simulated live, just in case.
Yeah. So it allows you, our video CMS allows you to upload a piece of content, a video. It won't publish it live, but you can schedule when it will start streaming as though it's a live event. So it means you've got that operational sort of simplicity of, you can record it, a day in advance, a week in advance, whatever works for your sort of production schedule, and then queue these things up to go out as the sort of the brand new live events in inverted commas for that week. And, we've got some clients that are operating that in a absolutely like clockwork way, week in, week out. And that, I mean, to the users, it's essentially as good as live. I mean, a lot of live TV isn't quite live. It's not really live. You can't tell. The thing is, it's never been broadcast before, so you're still people seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Then we've got the schedule VOD, as we call it, where you can just schedule old classes. So this is sort of like essentially like reruns, like linear TV, like going through the channel browser and just seeing what's on, which is just another nice way of promoting stuff, drawing attention to things, and people not having to think. Click in. You could almost make them like channels, really, like have the live yoga channel, which is just playing yoga classes all day long.
Nice.
And then offline downloads I talked about. We've also done tons of integrations. I mean, this is a bit of a sort of a boring one, but we're just.
I was going to say that. Who are the integrations? No, well, I think a lot of listeners, we had some integrations, but we weren't. It wasn't we weren't strong in depth with our integrations. But what are the integrations that are coming? I think for others listening.
So we're integrating with some more of the big membership platforms: ABC Financial, MindBody, some other ones, Pike 13, Mariana Tech. So there's I'm probably forgetting a few of them as well. So there's a whole bunch on the membership system side, and then I don't think we're doing wellness living in the end, actually.
Okay. I thought they were there. All right. Okay.
But then there's also CRM integrations as well. When I say CRM, like sort of email marketing platforms, so MailChimp, Emma, HubSpot, probably one other main one, which I'm forgetting now. But yeah, I mean, just huge flexibility now for clients joining our platform to be able to either pick one of the ones they're working with, or we're always flexible and open to new integrations now. I mean, we just eat them for breakfast, basically. The team just know how to architect and support these things, and not affect performance or reliability. Fingers crossed. I think we really do have a pretty stable platform. I mean, there's very few production incidents. Yeah. There's probably other things as well. I think that's the main ones.
No, but I think any listeners that are listening to this, make sure you're reaching out to your CS team, to your CS individual from Wexer, to understand how you can best utilize these. I guess from your point of view, Jamie, your advice to the transitioning people that are on the migration in regards to adopting these features, if they're not adopting them, what would be your advice?
Well, I mean, some of the way we build these features, they can be switched on and off, but in general, we don't like to do that too much. It becomes too complicated and too cherry picking. I mean, I think, let the users, vote with their, clicks, essentially. That if a feature's there and it's not,
we'll tell you what's right.
Exactly. Yeah, and these are all solid features that have been proven out. So I think it's just a case of letting the users try them out, sending the feedback. We're always very open to getting feedback from people, from clients and end users. The more the better on that. We want to make the platform as good as we possibly can, and everything that comes in we respond to. It's difficult to respond very quickly if we need to change a feature or add a feature, but I think we do try and genuinely make a name for ourselves to be responsive and adaptive in that regard.
Yeah. No, we're here for you. We are your partners, so we want the feedback, and we're going to do what we can to support you. I guess, like, probably closing this, because I know everyone's attention span doesn't want to go over 30 minutes, but for you personally, like, thinking about, new people wanting to become CTO, currently product managers, et cetera, what would your advice be to them, like, in terms of career advice?
I mean, I certainly always, it's one of those jobs, it's a bit like CEO, but not quite so broad as the job you're doing. But, when you take one notch down, and then there are just so many things. So I think, I can't imagine ever sort of sitting there and thinking, well, I feel like I can kick back a bit. I know everything's ticking along nicely. So I think always staying humble and realizing you're always going to be learning. It's just a massive one. I mean, I think I have a little bit of a sort of fighting the imposter syndrome thing. It's like, what the hell? There's just so much here I don't know about. But and then I have to say, remind myself I do know a lot as well. And it's just that's the thing. There's just so many things to keep tabs on, even on a weekly basis. There's things that come up, and then on a quarterly basis, like, well, do we need to do more on this? Does the security review need to be done again? How are we doing on performance, the products, the strategy side? It's just a massive amount of little attention slices that you need to spend time on.
But I think your willingness to learn. Well, I think for everyone that's successful, willingness to learn is one of the biggest traits, right? If you boil a lot of these things down, but I guess where do you go for your sources of information?
I mean, I think that's a big one. Is that sort of there's things I read. There's a couple of newsletters I like reading to keep on top of things. I realize although I've got experience in development and databases and so on like that, I'm so far removed from that on a day-to-day level. I consider myself more on the sort of the technical strategy, asking the right questions of the people that really know their things in those more detailed, technically focused areas. So you've got to have the right people around. I mean, I couldn't do this without having the right solutions architect and the tech leads on each of the products, who are I'm asking questions like, have we thought of this, and going through sort of a process to make sure things are architected and thought through in the right way. But it's them at the end of the day that has to make this stuff happen. So it's just absolutely vital to realize what you don't know and what you can't do yourself.
I think it's vital for anything. Like, there's advice across the board, not even personally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, what? Because from a CEO's perspective, and don't shoot me, product managers and et cetera, CTOs, but like a lot of people struggle with. They're so technical and they've got an engineering background or something like that which is amazing because the depth of knowledge is fantastic. But to boil that to a position that you kind of understanding your audience from a strategy level, from investors level, or the rest of it, I always see that that's a massive hurdle for people to overcome. Like, you've done that quite easily. Is that because of the agency background, or where did that come from?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I did a bunch of years really on the tech side, just understanding the building blocks of how internet and technology works. And then I moved into sort of more on the user experience design.
Right.
So I did that from an agency side for a number of years, and I think having that breadth is what really helps me, because when it comes down to it, not to quote the sort of the really obvious cliched people, but Steve Jobs, he was just amazing at realizing it's not about the actual technology, it's about what you do with it and what works, like that.
How it packages.
That famous story when he was in Xerox labs and they were showing him the first ever prototype of the mouse. And the story goes, nobody in that room really had a clue. They were just showing this thing, and they hadn't thought of any commercialization. And apparently Steve Jobs was just like leaping around the room, just going, "You guys just don't realize what you've got here. This is going to change the world," And he had that ability to see something that technology-wise seemed very simple, what it could actually do. So that's what I try to do. I think is not get too tied up in the ins and outs of the technology, but thinking how can technology and business and design those three elements go together. Always having a sort of a feeling of the commercial realities and the landscape, and being able to say no sometimes, when necessary, and things like that.
Is that because, again, and this is not just how great Jamie's session is, but is that how you stop people from over engineering as well? Because I think that's a classic especially in the fitness industry. What I've seen is like so amazing breadth and depth of a feature, but to your point, that's not even used. So and I think we lived that in the custom fit days in terms of the system for the PTs, right? Like they we built maybe you share the story, where we built a huge system that no one used because it was, I don't know, what was it, too over engineered, or we just didn't get the feedback right?
I don't think in that case it was really over engineered. It was more just the sort of the cultural landing wasn't. And I don't think really don't think anybody did anything wrong in that. It was just it was really, there was program managers, there was people trying to launch it, there was education programs, but you just don't necessarily get it right first time. And if anything, we were almost too sort of startup-y about it. We launched it when there was still a few kind of hiccups in like launching it and getting users onboarded onto it. It wasn't beautifully streamlined. So I think that was probably the main factor in that. It's just not really an over engineering thing, but your point is definitely right. Like every week, sometimes even every day, I'm sort of weighing up something and thinking, do we need to do that? Is it good business value? How much time is it going to take? What's the ROI going to be? Almost tying myself in knots, but I think you've got to do that, because if you just brief a tech guy or a tech team to build a feature, and then if you keep saying yes, they've figured out this thing, should we do it like this or do it like that? This is the best one. This is the medium one. You can end up just spending weeks of extra time, and it's a judgment call. Like, is this good enough for now? Let's just launch it. If nobody uses this, or it doesn't work in that way, we're gonna have to change this anyway. So it's I love that challenge, but it can be really frustrating sometimes.
You kind of it's like you got your devil and your angel on each side, right? I think we all have to go through it in some version with our businesses or the things that we need to launch, because resources aren't endless unless you've got huge amount of money, and then it's only endless for a while until the realities get hit.
And that can be a bad thing anyway. I mean, constraints are good.
I was going to ask you that. Like we've seen, especially during COVID, of course there was so much demand of the system for our system. It was crazy. But what is that, in a way, was that a bad thing from a tech perspective, because there was just so many resources, maybe, and pressure to get things out the door?
Yeah, I mean, there's a point when it becomes not great. Having just a free reign. Like, here's a load of money and people, go and just see if you can figure something out. That doesn't generally work with human nature very well. It
doesn't happen in Wexer.
Well, very few companies or situations, but I mean, there's a sort of a middle ground. I think with COVID, it was crazy because it was just almost overnight. Loads of people that we'd been talking to, who'd been thinking about stuff, then were suddenly like, my gyms are closed. I need to launch this by end of the week. And we were like, well, we can't possibly do that, but trying to scale up everything we did as rapidly as possible. And although you obviously have to make sure you don't break people, it does certainly force you to do stuff either because you want to make money and you want to satisfy clients, and doing our absolute utmost to do that. So it was a
and then not necessarily COVID, just in general advice for managing tech talent. Like what's your go-to?
Well, I mean, I think it's quite a big team we've got now, so I just try and make sure I have frequent enough contact with the key people. I mean, I can't talk to everybody in the outsourced team. Obviously, I talk to everybody in the internal Wexer tech product teams, but it's having the right structure in place is really important to go with the process, and just the right cadence of contact points. I just try and avoid clogging everybody's calendars up, because it ends up, if you're the CTO or the CEO, that ends up becoming a real problem in the end. Like,
And I
nobody's
think,
getting anything
I think
done.
the tech people moan the most about meetings out of every single
Tech people
department.
hate meetings. I mean, I have an element of that. I'm like, do I really need this meeting? I've got a kind of like meetings scanner, just like, what's this one? Why have I been invited? You just want to try and let people get on with the stuff they want to do. I mean, tech people generally want to have their headphones on, getting on, writing code and delivering value. And that's how they've ended up being in that role. And you don't want to keep pulling them into meetings to review everything and discuss everything unless you actually really need to do it. So it's keeping that balance between people feeling motivated and part of the team and believing in the mission and wanting to, go the extra mile every now and again. But doing that without talking to them all the time and the currency being how many meetings you had. It's absolutely not about meetings. Is not a currency of work in tech and product. It's almost like the anti-currency.
I get you. All right. Well, and then how do people get hold of you, Jamie? What's the best thing to get you on?
If they want to get in touch to discuss anything or whatever? Well, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. Everybody can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Wexer. That's probably the best one. I was on Twitter, X, a little bit, but certainly not active. I wouldn't bother going there. As of now. LinkedIn's probably the best one.
Stay away from Elon. Okay, look, I really appreciate you spending the time going through the features. I hope everyone's found this extremely valuable. And again, feel free to reach out to Jamie if any advice, and I recommend you do. So, Jamie, thank you for being on the Wexer podcast.
That's been great. Thanks, Paul. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, Jamie.
Okay,
Bye.